So I really wanted to desperately film my review of The Cursed Child, but my camera has no battery. And I had other things that I was going to be editing today, but this is taking priority because I want to get this done. So, yeah, let's get into it. We're going to start with the pros, and my pros and cons lists are pretty evenly split, so let's get into them. Okay, so just to start off, I did see the spoilers when the preview of the play came out, and it made me really apprehensive, and I didn't actually pre-order the book. I just went out and bought it the day after it came out because I was away the day it came out. And also it made me really apprehensive because I bought tickets to the play. And I was like, oh no, it doesn't seem that good. But, I mean, after reading it, I do feel a bit better about it, and the main reason, the first con, which is on my little list on my phone, is Scorpius. I mean, if you haven't read this because you saw the spoilers or, you know, you've been put off, just read it purely for Scorpius because he is... I never thought I'd feel this way about Malfoy. Scorpius, he's a huge nerd, basically. He's a huge nerd and he's adorable and, yeah, he likes homework and he's not athletic and it's also really good because, as you can see, Slytherin, and it's like a Slytherin that's a bit of a geek, and I can relate so much, and I'm so happy that Scorpius Malfoy exists, and also both him and Albus, spoiler, Albus, yeah, obviously this contains lots of spoilers, Albus is also in Slytherin. They're just so good. I like nice little adorable Slytherins that everyone hates, and I feel so bad. So yeah, that's it, good Slytherins, and Scorpius Malfoy is the first point, and I could talk about Scorpius, like, I could just make an hour-long video just talk about how much I love Scorpius. I mean, he's amazing. He's amazing, and I'm really excited to see that Albus and Scorpius dynamic played out on stage. Which is another point is that kind of their friendship, which I feel is riddled with subtext. Yeah, Scorpius and Al's relationship is kind of, it's a little bit queer. I've done queer theory. I've studied it properly. There's lots of, you know, you could very much read into that. And I know a lot of people did the same with Drarry, but personally, I just looked like them. I never got Drarry. I've read those books millions and millions of times, and as I said, I've studied queer study at like an academic, like a really high academic degree level, and I've never seen anything like purely like hate and loathing. I mean, Malfoy even says in The Cursed Child that he was jealous of Harry, like jealous of his friendship, not like that's his whole, one of his reasons for being really bitter, and also just, you know, his family were a bit evil. So that moves me on to another point, which I'm really excited to talk about this one as well, because he's, as I just said, like, never really been a huge fan of Draco Malfoy or Drarry or anything. We don't get to meet her in this, but she's basically Malfoy's wife and Scorpius' mum. And, like, obviously you can tell how much he loved her, how much Draco loves Scorpius, and he's really, really changed. He's pretty nice, and it's so weird because I always feel like, you know, it's hard when a character's such an arsehole to make them nice, but obviously he was a teenager, now he's an adult, he's in his, like, pushing into his 40s. Just like the whole original story is about how Voldemort didn't know love, and that's why he was weaker than Harry, taught love to Draco, and he is so much better because of it, and I love that the whole concept of love is very overarching from the books and also into this play, so you can definitely tell that's where JK's influence was. So yeah, she like changed him in all realities. So the story revolves around time turning and changing time in Harry's 4th year, and then subsequently when they go back to the present day, things have changed. So in one of them, Draco is working in Harry's job at the Ministry, and which is Harry's job in the real reality. And Voldemort's still in power, and, you know, he's torturing all these mudbloods and stuff, and Scorpius goes to his office and he gives him all this spiel about Mum and stuff, and you see that despite this new world where Draco is a Death Eater, he's working for Voldemort, he still wants to be good, so yay! Draco is a changed man in all realities. That was another good point. Okay, gonna get into the Granger Weasleys now. So, we're gonna start off with Rose. Rose Granger Weasley. It's not Weasley, it's Granger Weasley, which I love because it means Hermione kind of kept her her name, and their kids have double-barreled names, and she's Minister of Magic, Minister Granger. Yeah, so I did like that. That was a nice little touch, Granger Weasley, especially since obviously Hermione's parents didn't see them again. She wiped their memories, so carrying on that name, I feel that was a very good touch. Yeah, so Rose, I think it's mentioned by Hermione that she's really excited to become, join the Quidditch team in her first or second year. So she's very sporty. And she's also mentioned how excited, she could take her hours early. So she's got Hermione's ambition and brains for, studying and taking exams. But she also wants to play Quidditch. And obviously Ron played Quidditch, not quite to the same level as, Ginny or even Charlie. But she's got that Weasley drive for Quidditch as well, which is really nice. It actually fits the surname Granger Weasley very well. Yeah, so I guess now we go on to Hermione as Minister of Magic, which I love, especially since the UK we just got our second ever British Prime Minister as well. So yeah, it's all good for females in politics. And yeah, there's not really much to say. She holds all these meetings. She's got an office. She's pretty badass. I definitely vote for her. There is a bit where Draco Malfoy says she only got the job because she's friends with Harry, but anyone who knows Hermione, which Draco should, knows that she's just a badass witch. All the stuff she did for Spew and helping Hagrid with Hippogriff, with Buckbeak's trial and stuff, and she's got really good grades, and Harry would be pretty useless if he didn't have Hermione. We all know, Harry would have died first year, if he hadn't become friends with Hermione. So I feel that was a really shit move on Draco's part. Okay, I've literally put Ron has all the top banter. So yeah. Quite a lot of Ron stuff is comical. And I will talk about in the cons how some of that is also a downfall of the play, because there's just some bits where I don't think Ron would be making a joke here, I don't think. But he's funny. Obviously, it says he's the manager of the joke shop, so I don't really know how George comes into this, whether George is taking a step back and isn't as involved as much in Weasley Wizards, or whether they have... I know they were looking at opening another shop in Hogsmeade, so I don't know if they have... Yeah, so I don't know if they have a shop each. It's never really explained, but all we know is John. Oh no! All we know is that Ron it's said that he's the manager, and also I guess he helps invent new products because he gives all of Harry's kids them as a gift. So James gets a comb that dyes his hair pink, and Albus gets a love potion and stuff. So yeah. And he tries to do muggle magic tricks as well. When we first meet him, when Lily runs up to him on the platform and he tries to steal her nose, but he's obviously not got her nose. He's really badly failed at it. And he's basically that really embarrassing dad to Rose and Hugo, but he's also that really kind of cool, fun, quirk. If he was your uncle, you only see him on occasion, so he's quite cool and funny. And that's Lily runs straight to him on the platform. And I love Ron. Everyone knows that I love Ron Weasley. He's my bae. Probably I love Scorpius as well, as I said, but Ron, special place in my heart for Ron Weasley. So yeah, it was good. Some of that Ron Weasley banter. Yeah, and also there's a bit where it's mentioned that he met up with Neville. Obviously, Neville is the herbology professor at Hogwarts, and they went to the Three Broomsticks or the Hog's Head or something, and they got proper drunk together. Yeah, and they got completely drunk. So I just love that, Ron and Neville getting completely wasted together, and Neville's professor. Oh dear, and he had to go back to Hogwarts to try and work out which flu network he needed. I just, that was a good little scene. I found that hilarious. So, yeah. Okay, so we've already talked about Draco and his wife, and now we're going to talk about the other couples, the big main couples, the ones that were endgame at the end of the Deathly Hallows. And, yeah, so that's Hermione and Hinny, or whatever you call Harry and Ginny. I've always called it Hinny. And I love Hinny. I'm Hinny trash, which is something you should know about me. So if you're not a fan of Hinny, if you're a Drarry fan, I'm so sorry. I don't like Drarry. I mentioned that earlier. I'm a huge Hinny fan. Hinny are always endgame in every single reality that the book, well, except for the one where Harry's dead. But in the other two, they are still married with the 3 kids, which is mentioned by Scorpius, I think, to Al. He's like, oh, my dad, is he different in this reality? He's like, oh no, he's still the same, married with 3 kids. But I do think Harry is changed in that reality. I do think that, a little bit. There's no way it'd be exactly the same. But I do think Harry's changed in that reality. That's an opinion. That's not me stating pros or cons. That's a headcanon. Okay, so yeah. Hinny are always endgame, and they are so adorable in this play. Like, for someone who's a huge Hinny shipper, oh, my heart. So Harry starts having nightmares again, and his scar starts hurting, and him and Ginny have this big talk, and she just knows. He's just like, well, how long has your scar not hurted for? And Harry's like, 22 years, and it's like this really nice, tender moment, and they just release pictures from the play as well, and it looks really sweet. Harry and Ginny sat on the end of the bed, you know, all grown up in their pyjamas. Yeah, so that's a really nice one. And also when Harry has this little argument with Al, which you haven't actually mentioned yet, that whole bit. I didn't put it on my list. Yeah, so basically Harry wishes that his son had never... No, he doesn't, he just wishes he wasn't his son. And, I mean, lots of people have problems being like, oh, he would never say this, blah, 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 blah. But I think in arguments you do say things in the heat of the moment that you don't mean. And I think this is probably what's happened in this case with Harry and Al. And, I mean, teenagers act out all the time, and parents accidentally get angry with them and say silly things, and the teenagers take it too far. So I do think Harry didn't mean it, and he does get a redemption from that at the end, just saying, like, he doesn't really know how to be a dad, he didn't have anyone to model it on. And you have to admit that Al was being a little bit difficult. You know, because Harry said it was fine if Al wasn't Slytherin, and it really is. I don't think Harry cares, but everyone else does, and then Al puts that divide up. I know I've gone off Hinny a bit. I will get back to it. Basically, so Harry has that argument with Al that I just mentioned, blah, 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 blah. And Ginny's like, I'm not angry at you for it. I know that you didn't mean it. I know you just need to apologise. I know Al, like, I know you're a good dad. You know, James and Lily. It's just Al's been quite difficult. Yeah, so she's very understanding, and she doesn't blame Harry. She doesn't have a go at Harry. She's not like, what did you say that to our son? She knows that Harry didn't mean it. Of course, Harry didn't mean it. People that think that it was written with the purpose of Harry meaning what he said to Al is stupid, because he didn't. We all know Harry's got a bit of a temper. He sometimes, you know, gets a bit angry. That screaming thing about how angry he got when he found out about Sirius Black, and who was that friend? You know, I mean, of course that's mostly in the film, but he does, you know, he does get angry when he attacks Malfoy with the spell from the Half-Blood Prince's book. That's a bit of a outlash of anger and emotion. So yeah. Okay, so two more points about Hinny, and then I'll get into some more on Hermione. So basically I started this point earlier, they have this argument, and it says that it's been bubbling for a while, they both know it's coming, and I'm like, oh no, Hinny argument, but this argument is not that angry, it's more like a frank discussion kind of argument, you know. I don't think Harry and Ginny could ever really hate each other, it's just like, we need to have this out now. But the argument gets interrupted by the arrival of Draco Malfoy, who is like, my son's crying, it's all your fault, Harry, because Harry told Al that he couldn't hang out with Scorpius anymore, and this is in the reality where Al is in Gryffindor, so it is easier for that to be put in place. And I think that's what the argument was about, the way that, because Harry bumped into Bane, the centaur, in the forest, and he said, there's a dark cloud around your son, and he was like, well, that's obvious. The Draco Malfoy son, because Harry and Draco hate each other, guys. Harry isn't real, and so he's like, well, it's obviously the Malfoy, right? So he bans Al from seeing Scorpius, and Scorpius is his only friend, and yeah, so then they have this little argument almost, and then Draco shows up and he's like, my son's crying, why have you done this, my poor little son. Oh, Draco's such a change now, guys. Oh. The one moment where you favour Draco over Harry, I didn't think that would ever happen, but it happens. More little thing to do in this Hinny section. This video is going to be so long. I might have to do it in a pros and cons split 2 videos. We will see. Is it's towards the end. It's when, like, he's trying to, like, how Harry should talk to Al and stuff. And Ginny's talking about how in second year with the whole Riddle's diary and how no one would talk to her afterwards. She was very isolated and lonely because everyone knew that she'd technically been the one that had been petrifying students, and although it wasn't necessarily her fault, it did put a divide between her. She felt silly, I think. Well, not silly, but, you know, felt like people wouldn't trust her and people were a bit apprehensive, and it was quite isolating, that whole experience of being basically possessed by Voldemort. But she mentions how Harry just came over and just said, hey, do you want to play Exploding Snap? And that sometimes all the kid needs is for someone to come over and offer to play Exploding Snap. And this is a bit where, like, I actually teared up with this bit because, as I said, Hinny trash. And it was just so sweet because, I mean, I don't think Harry knew, like, that he was doing anything spectacular. He was just being Harry, and he was just like, Ginny's his best friend's sister, and, you know, she's been through a lot, and he was just treating her quite normal. And yeah, and that's obviously in the second book, like, Ginny is a bit obsessed with Harry, but that's more from a kind of almost like a fan. But that's when she really started to like Harry for who he truly was, and that's so sweet. And that's probably where I'm gonna leave Hinny for now. But like I said, I could spend hours talking about Scorpius. I could spend hours doing about Hinny, and I would love to do more Harry Potter Hinny related videos. So if you like that and you find this, give it a like or something, and or a comment. More Hinny. I would do that. I'll probably do it anyway. But we should move on to Ron and Hermione. Unlike Hinny, they're not together in every reality. But they do love each other in every reality, which is good. So it means that Ron and Hermione is kind of like soulmates, but sometimes, depending on the situation, they can't make it work. Almost like tragic lovers. Yeah, when they go back in time, the first time, Al and Scorpius wear Durmstrang robes, and they bump into Hermione. And at first, Scorpius thinks it's Rose, because obviously Rose looks a lot like her mum. So, yeah. He's like, oh my god, Rose, what are you doing here? She's just like, Hermione's like, what is Rose? And because of these weird, they go and they curse Cedric so he doesn't, defeat the dragon. I can't remember exactly, it's gone from the top of my head, but yep, they interfere with Cedric doing the first task so that he loses the first task so that he won't go on to win the Triwizard Tournament. So, you know, him and Harry are joint winners and they get to the cup first, because Cedric went into the maze. I think he went in first, didn't he? So yeah, he had that lead so that he wouldn't have that and he wouldn't get killed by Voldemort as the spare. And I'm just assuming everyone watches this has read the book, so I'm not going too heavy into the plot. I'm just sharing what I liked and what I didn't like. But yeah, basically, Al overhears Amos Diggory talking to Harry about how he wants to go back in time and save Cedric. And then they meet Delphi Diggory, who is supposedly his niece, and she kind of helps them go back in time and teach them how to use a time traveler. So yeah, because of these suspicious guys in Durmstrang robes, which Hermione's pretty sure she saw curse Cedric Diggory, it makes her really suspicious of Durmstrang and Victor Crumb, and therefore she doesn't go to the Yule Ball with Crumb. She goes to the Yule Ball with Ron, which I know most Hermione shippers, that's like their dream, right? Ron and Hermione at the Yule Ball. But because they just go as friends, their friendship stays in that box of just friends. And obviously in the fourth book, Ron goes with Padma. In this situation, he goes with Hermione, but he still ends up dancing with Padma. And him and Padma get married. And they have a little... And he's always getting into trouble at Hogwarts, so Ron's there to discipline his son because Padma bossed him around and talk. But basically, Padma... It's put across that Padma's quite a bossy wife, and Ron is completely different. Like, he's not as funny... And, you know, as we were talking earlier, the pro was Ron's top banter in this. So Ron's, you know, he's not as funny, he's, you know, he doesn't do as many jokes and stuff, and he's like a different person. And not even, like, the Ron in this, you know, he's quite funny, and it's kind of like the Ron in the books, but this new Ron with Padma, it's not quite the same. And there's this moment where he bumps into Hermione, and Hermione is, I think she's like a spinster, and she's the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, I believe, but she's not very nice. Hermione's a bit of a, without Ron, Hermione's a bit of a bitch, and it is strange. Like, she's not very nice to Al or Scorpius and stuff, and yeah, I mean, Hermione as a teacher would be good, but in this situation, she's horrible as a teacher. Like, she's bordering into Snape territory. And it's weird, but then Ron bumps into Hermione, he's there to have a stern talking to his son, and he's like, oh, have you done something different with your hair? And Hermione's like, probably just combed it back. It's like, oh, well, your hair does look good. And it's like this weird moment where you're like, oh my god, you guys love each other, why aren't you together? And it's so frustrating for people that read those 7 books and were like basically wanting Hermione to happen the whole time, and then it did, and now it doesn't, and it's hard because you know how endgame they were in the real reality and how good Hermione is. So yeah. And then in the next reality, the one where Voldemort rules the world, Harry is dead, therefore Albus doesn't exist, and that adds to the Scorpius Albus. He's like heartbroken that his friend doesn't exist anymore. And he chooses, he's really popular in this world, Scorpius is, and he's not in the real world, but he chooses Al and what's right over his own popularity, which is why I love him, as I mentioned earlier. So in this one, Harry's dead, and Ron and Hermione are basically outlaws, and Hermione's like a wanted witch, like she's badass wanted witch, and Ron's, it's made out that he's not as wanted, he hasn't done as many dangerous things, but yeah, they kind of live together in hiding, but they're not in a relationship as such. And they are with Snape, which I will get onto in a bit, because I need to talk about Snape in that reality. But yeah, so there's this moment where they kind of confess that they've always, like, I think Hermione's like, I've always loved you, and Hermione's gonna, like, you know, go out there and distract the Death Eaters because she's more wanted than them, while they go back in time and try and fix Scorpius' mess, I think. There's this big confession of love, and I've always loved you, and it's another one where they couldn't quite make it work because of living in hiding, and there's not really time when you're the most wanted witch in the world to be like settling down, and so there's a bit where they use Polyjuice Potion. Of course, in true Harry Potter style, there has to be a Polyjuice Potion. So Al, Scorpius, and Delphi pretend to be Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And Albus doesn't pretend to be his dad, he is Ron. And the real Hermione, they're trying to look for the Time Turner. This is when they're trying to look for the Time Turner. It's hidden in Hermione's office. It's her Minister of Magic office. And they're trying to find it. So, and then the real Hermione shows up with the real Harry. So obviously, Delphi and Scorpius can't be there because... so... cue Al as Ron kissing his arm, which is technically weird, but I mean, they're technically not related by blood, so I mean, it's not, yeah, it could be worse. Yeah, so he's Ron, and he's being like, oh, we should have another baby, trying to distract Hermione by saying all this stuff, and yeah, it's quite sweet. Because Hermione's just like, what are you on about? And then later in the plays, in the book, whatever you want to refer to it as, there is a moment where Ron, I think they find out about these other realities, and he's like, our kids didn't exist and stuff, and we weren't in love, blah, 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 blah. And Ron's like, I want to marry you again, I want to get a renewal on our vows, because he realises that maybe the wedding the first time wasn't as perfect, because Ron, we know Ron, he was probably very nervous, because he loves Hermione so much, and he always has since he was like 12, and so, yeah, he got really drunk at their wedding, so he wanted to do it again, and to show her that he still loves her, the same way that he did, you know, probably back when he kissed her in the Chamber of Secrets, and that's so, so sweet. There's also, one of my favourite things about the original books, which I'm rereading, is how Ron always sticks up for Hermione. It's like when he tells Malfoy to eat slugs. There's a very similar moment in here when Malfoy says that line about how Hermione only got the job because she's friends with Harry, and Ron gets really defensive and he wants to go and attack Draco, and I think like Ginny has to hold him back. Yeah, so yep, lots of Hermione. So basically Draco and Harry have a bit of a fight, and this is after Ginny and Harry have that argument, I think, and she leaves the room and she comes back and they're like fighting in pure like classic Harry Potter, Harry and Draco wand fight. And no, the wand isn't a euphemism because, as I said, I don't ship Drarry. Drarry isn't real. So yeah. And Malfoy's like, oh, I'm sorry for destroying your kitchen to her. He's quite apologetic about it, which is so good because Draco's a changed man, guys. As I've mentioned a million times, you can tell that I've picked up some pros that I'm absolutely running with them because I haven't even gotten to cons yet. But then Ginny is like, well, it's not really my kitchen. I don't do any of the cooking and cleaning. Harry does all the cooking. And I'm like, yes, gender role reversal. It's so good. And, you know, Ginny's quite badass in this. She threatens to tell Mrs. Weasley about Ron when he's, like, being a bit of an idiot. And I did love the Weasley sibling banter, because always, like, Ron always shows up, he's like, oh yeah, Ginny wrote to me and she told me that this was happening. I feel like there's, and I will go into the concept, there's more of a connection between Ginny and Ron than there is technically Harry, because Ginny's the one that's telling Ron what's happening and Harry hasn't really done that. But then Harry works at the Ministry with Hermione, so it is quite good to have that sibling dynamic there, and that's just another little thing I wanted to add. And yeah, Ginny is pretty badass in this. As I said, she's really like supportive of Harry, and I think pretty sure she's the one that tries to hold Ron back from attacking Draco. And yeah, there is still some of that fiery old Ginny. There's also a bit where Ron mentions that the Weasley siblings had a kind of bet wager because they thought that Ginny might end up in Slytherin. And he also calls her Skinny Ginny at one point, so it was quite good to have that sibling dynamic as adults, so still there as adults, and the whole idea that they thought Ginny would be in Slytherin, which, as a huge Ginny Weasley fan, Hinny, Trash, and a Slytherin, made me happy. Can you imagine a Slytherin Ginny? I think that's all I've got to say on the Weasleys. So I've got one more thing on before I get to the cons, and that is talking about Snape. So in the alternative reality where Harry dies, it's because Cedric Diggory became a Death Eater, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't think Cedric Diggory could become a Death Eater. I really don't think he had it in him. I do think he was a nice guy. But basically Cedric Diggory becomes a Death Eater. He kills Neville, which... and because he kills Neville never kills Nagini, so then when Harry goes to face Voldemort still has a Horcrux left. So he manages to kill Harry. I don't know though, for some reason in this reality Snape doesn't die. But Snape died obviously before Nagini even got killed, so I don't get how the death of Neville Longbottom necessarily affects that, but it does. And Snape gets to live. And I do feel like there's lots of debate in the Harry Potter like fandom about Snape, whether we can really ever forgive him for being such a horrible person. Like, if we can give Dudley and Draco redemption, we should be able to give at least a tiny bit to Snape. So there's basically 3 people that are a member of the Order left, in hiding at least. I don't know what the rest are doing, being slaves or hiding in different places. So yeah, there's Ron, Hermione, as I mentioned earlier, and Hermione's a really wanted witch, and Severus Snape is helping them. But he's also still working at Hogwarts as Potions Master. In this reality, he doesn't maintain being headmaster. The headmaster mistress role goes to Dolores Umbridge. Yep, Dolores Umbridge comes back, guys. I'm real excited about that. We all love Dolores Umbridge. So yeah, but Snape's still Potion Master. But he's also hiding Ron and Hermione in the... Yeah, Snape's helping them hide out. He's still working a double agent. He's still part of the Order. He's on the good team. Which is good, because there was still some debate about Snape's true loyalties, blah, 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 blah. But he's helping Ron and Hermione And there is also this really weird dynamic friendship between Hermione and Snape. There's like banter between them, and it's so weird because, as I said about Snape's redemption, he wasn't just horrible to Harry, he was also horrible to Hermione and would tell her off for being a know-it-all. But here, there's some kind of mutual respect and friendship between Hermione and Snape, and it's weird, but it's good, and I feel like it redeemed him. And I mean, I don't know like what people like this. Obviously, not all of it. It was like based on J.K. Rowling's idea. It's not written by J.K. So whether it's wholly canon or not. But I feel like that was we get some redemption for Snape there, because a lot of people have been like, well, the way he treated Hermione, blah blah blah. Can we forgive him? The way he treated students at school. I feel like it kind of does. He finds out that he dies in the real reality, and he's willing to change and die, like, you know, to reverse things the way that they're meant to be, and even if that means that he died, because he knows that it was what was meant to happen, and that in the end it's for the greater good. A world without Voldemort, a world with Harry, a world with Ginny. So he's willing to make that sacrifice even though he knows he's going to die. So I do feel there is a little bit of redemption from Snape, and Snape finds out that in the real reality Harry named his son after him, which I think is quite sweet. And that how Harry tells Al that Snape was one of the bravest men he ever knew. So that's quite sweet. I also think that also pushes him to be like, yeah, I have to die. So yeah, that was quite a nice moment. Okay, so the first bit I'm going to go into on my list of cons is how I was talking earlier about how in the second reality I do think Harry has changed. Obviously because if the Hermione dynamic changes, and that changes the whole 7th book, because, you know, Ron wouldn't leave, blah 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 blah, the Horcrux wouldn't have affected him, would have affected Harry or Hermione, what would the Locket have done? That's never really explained, and there are other plot holes which I will get to. I'll do a whole bit on plot holes in a bit. But I want to talk about how I think Harry's changed in that world, but it also comes as a con, because maybe he wasn't and this is just shitty stuff. So obviously the whole bit where he bans Albus from seeing Scorpius, and he's believing all this centaur bullshit, and he's really horrible about it, because Scorpius is literally Albus's only friend, and he literally tells his son, you know that one friend you've got, you can't hang out with them. And the whole thing was like Harry, it's always been pointed out in the books that he would be useless without his friends, without Ron and Hermione, and the strength of that, the golden trio. And so that being like, oh no, you can't have this friendship that means so much to you, is a bit horrible, really. And also there's a bit where he, like, lays into Professor McGonagall and, like, whoa, I'd never be brave enough to talk shit to McGonagall. And it's basically like, how would you know you've never had kids? Like, yeah, but she's worked at a school all her life, basically. She probably knows more about children than you do, Harry, because you're being a pretty shitty father right now. And yeah, that's the bit that people have a lot of problems with, is that outburst of Harry at McGonagall. But as I said, I do think in that reality it's not Harry as we know him in the I want to say real world, but Harry Potter sadly isn't real. Or if it is, I never got my letter, so I'm bitter about it. But yeah, in the original reality, Harry, I think it is a different Harry. I think he is different. I think he wouldn't have said that in the reality where Albus and Slytherin. So yeah, that's that a little bit. I just wanted to mention that because I realised I hadn't touched on Harry being my problematic fave. That's what Harry is in the Cursed Child. Harry is a problematic fave. He's super problematic. But he still gets his name on the book. So he has to be a fave. Okay. The first thing on the list is very, very obviously Delphi Diggory, Delphi Riddle, whatever you want to call her. Like, what? She is such... I mean, you read... And lots of people make comparisons to My Immortal, and I'm pretty sure Voldemort does have a daughter in My Immortal. I haven't read My Immortal in ages, but I did watch the web series, which I will link below, because it's such a good web series. It made the story actually pretty good. And I'm pretty sure in there is a girl that is Voldemort's daughter. And she's like, oh, it's made mention to that she's a Mary Sue, right? And I feel like Delphi is a Mary Sue. And Mary Sue is basically, like, usually applied to, like, characters in books and quite a lot to, like, original characters, blah, blah, blah. About how they're quite like boring and ordinary and don't necessarily need to be there. And yeah, I feel like Delphi didn't necessarily need to be there. Could have still had Al travelling back in time and messing up the future without there being Voldemort having a daughter. I mean, you could also still have the conspiracy theories about Scorpius and then have that be debunked and be like, no, Voldemort didn't have any children. Stop talking shit. But yeah, I mean, it did extend things and make it longer, but I feel like you could have had something else happen. Had like the actual Voldemort come back in that reality and have something happen that they get stuck in that reality. Obviously, Al wasn't alive then, but you could have another one where Albus is alive and there was Voldemort or something, and yeah, I don't know. And you could have had actual Voldemort. I feel like that would have been better, or at least one of the Death Eaters that we knew that escaped Azkaban or was never caught. There's mention that Theodore Nott and stuff, and they're a famous Death Eater family. Someone remind everyone in the comments, or I'll flash it up on the screen. They raised Delphi and they were Death Eaters, and obviously if they were raising a child, they were never caught, they were in hiding, so it could have just been them escaping, could have just been the Lestrangers. And this whole Delphi's, I mean, she has brilliant, like her hair sounds fantastic and her tattoo sounds badass, and she's an Augury. That's what she's referred to as, the Augury will sit by her master's side or something. Yeah. But she's just a bit, especially compared to, like, she's hanging out with Albus and Scorpius, and you know how much I love Scorpius, and I just feel she falls a bit flat. And though Al being blindsided by a girl, I mean, it does kind of add something to it. It brings a kind of jealousy almost element to that relationship with Scorpius, which, as we know, Hermione, their relationship, the jealousy was key to them becoming endgame and soulmates, because in the world where they didn't get that jealousy at the Yule Ball, nothing really happened, and they didn't end up together. So I guess she could be helping sport on Sporbius, is that what people are calling it? Yeah, that's the only good thing I'm going to say about Delphi. Okay, so Delphi she's introduced as a Diggory, but she's not a Diggory. She's been using an unforgivable curse on Amos and convincing him, basically mind controlling him, being like, I'm your niece, Delphi, and tricking people into thinking she was a nurse at an old people's home, which I should have put in the pros, because I love that there's a wizarding old people's home. I love that concept. But yeah, she tricking people, and she was raised by Death Eaters. But she is the daughter of Voldemort and Bellatrix Lestrange, which, I mean, I know that if Voldemort wanted to create an heir, I know that Bellatrix would have been more than willing to volunteer. She would have been like Katniss in the Hunger Games. I volunteer as tribute! Because she was one of his most loyal servants, and yeah. But also, I feel like, why would Voldemort need to create an heir? Because he thought that he was immortal. At this point, where he would have impregnated Bellatrix, he would have not known that any of his Horcruxes had been destroyed, because it said that she was born before the Battle of Hogwarts. So at this point, Voldemort thought he was winning, basically. He thought all his Horcruxes were intact, and he believed himself immortal. I don't think Voldemort had any doubt that he was going to lose to Harry again. I really thought that this time he believed he was going to win. I don't think he would have needed to do that, or thought he needed to do that. So that's a little bit of a plot hole. Also, surely it would have meant that Bellatrix was pregnant. She would have been pregnant around the time that they showed up at the Malfoy Manor, surely. When she tortured Hermione when she used the Cruciatus Curse on Hermione. Surely she wouldn't have been pregnant then. Surely they would have noticed. And surely Malfoy would have known, because they spent the whole time in the Malfoy Manor. Like, Bellatrix and Voldemort were in the Malfoy Manor the whole time leading up to the Battle of Hogwarts. So I find it really hard to believe that if Delphi was a thing, that Draco wouldn't have known about her, or that Lucius and definitely Narcissa, who is Bellatrix's sister, wouldn't have had a clue. I just feel like they would have known and they would have implemented her sooner. They wouldn't have given up and, you know, surrendered if they knew they had a new Dark Lord and a new prophecy to follow. So I don't really, like, I just feel like, was she really, or was she just told that she was the, you know, was she really the child of those Death Eaters? It's never, also wouldn't have meant that she was pregnant when Hermione polyjuiced into Bellatrix. So I don't know exactly how polyjuice works, but surely, you know, if she was pregnant, that would have been noticeable to Hermione, or she would have maybe had morning sickness symptoms or something. I'm not really sure the time. I can't remember the exact time, but I'm pretty sure Delphi said she was born before the Battle of Hogwarts. I don't know how soon before, like literally the day before. I don't know, around the same time as Teddy, I suppose. But yeah, that's a bit of a plot hole. For me, that doesn't make sense because Bellatrix is running around torturing people, and I really. So I mean, yeah, and also I don't, as I said, Draco Voldemort would have wanted a child or needed an heir. And also the whole thing, she wants to go and meet him. Voldemort doesn't care. Like, he doesn't love anyone. So that whole storyline to me is just like, oh, so what's the point? Surely, your people that raised you would have taught you all about the Dark Lords. You would have known that he didn't have love. That's the reason it's in the history books, surely, in the Wizarding history books, that Harry defeated Voldemort. Voldemort's one weakness is that he didn't know how to love. So I don't know why you'd want to meet your father when he's obviously not going to have any feelings for you, when he's purely a 110% monster. Another big thing that's a bit of a con, which is a huge plot point, is, I mean, a time turners, it kind of works. I get it. But I'm pretty sure we're led to believe that they were all destroyed. I mean, of course, Draco has one, and he mentions that his dad had to get his hands on this dangerous item. And as we know from the second book, the Malfoy mansion is filled with banned illegal artifacts that Lucius is trying to sell in Borgin and Burke. So it would make sense that Lucius, with all his power and money, did somehow get his hands on a time turner. And, you know, somehow one that wasn't quite destroyed, one that was never given back, one that got lost in a field, I don't know. And Theodore Nott had one as well. That's how Harry finds one. Theodore Nott has one. He confiscates it. Hermione hides it in her office. Okay, we've worked around it. It's never really explained how that one survived. Or it was a new one that was created, I think, maybe. It doesn't quite work the same as a normal time turner, I don't believe. And it only has a 5-minute. You can only travel back in time 5 minutes. And obviously the one Hermione has in the third book doesn't work like that because they travel back a couple of hours, don't they? And they basically ride it out until they catch up with time. Now, I do find it's quite funny because anyone that's watched the Star Kid musicals, I'm a huge Star Kid fan. I love Darren Criss. But the whole point of the second one, the second musical, a Harry Potter sequel, is that Lucius Malfoy gets his hands on a time turner. And we know that he does in The Cursed Child as well. And he uses it to go back in time and stop Harry from defeating Voldemort. He tries to kill Harry in his first year so that he'll never destroy Voldemort in his second year, because that's how a Harry Potter musical universe sets. Let's go to that. Harry kills Voldemort when he's 12. So yeah, I found that quite funny, the connection between Malfoys and time turners and a Harry Potter sequel. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a plot, like how, I mean, I can imagine Lucius getting one, but I'm not sure if they were all destroyed. I mean, so as I mentioned, Harry has these nightmares again, and his scar starts hurting, and he keeps hearing Voldemort going, Harry Potter, in the distance. And so basically, this makes him think, well, Voldemort's coming back, something, you know, there's a resurgence in the dark side. This isn't Star Wars, so I'm saying the dark side, but yeah. So Hermione holds these meetings in the Ministry, and her, Ron, Draco, and Harry all at the front of this meeting. And basically, like, we think that Voldemort's back or something. We know something's happening. And people don't believe him. Like, oh, just because Harry's having his scar hurts, why should we believe him? Do you remember what happened in the 4th book and the 5th book in Harry's 4th and 5th years when people didn't believe Harry? They were like, oh no, and Fudge being like, Voldemort isn't back, and then it turns out Voldemort was back. You need to trust Harry. He was a part of Voldemort. He had a part of Voldemort's soul in him. So when Voldemort's reasserting, it's gonna have an after effect on Harry. Especially if there's like Owen, Scorpius are creating alternative realities where maybe Harry wasn't destroyed or the Horcrux wasn't destroyed. I mean, obviously they don't know that's happening, but I would trust Harry. And I would trust your Minister of Magic. I trust Hermione with my life. So it never worked well for them before when they weren't believing anything Harry was saying. And back then, the Minister of Magic was disagreeing with him. And obviously, he's your Minister of Magic, so you're gonna maybe side with him. But this time, the Minister of Magic was agreeing with Harry. She was believing Harry. And I don't get why people were like, I don't believe it. And I think Draco was one of those people as well, but I mean, I guess maybe he was just worried because obviously he'd been in a big Death Eater family and what that would mean for him and his son, and as it does in the 3rd reality, where he is a Death Eater even though he wants to be good. We've got one that says not gay enough. Yeah, I feel like it would have been nice to add maybe a different dynamic to Scorpius and Owl. Maybe it is kind of hinted at, as I said, but it would have been quite nice to have it more obvious. I guess we'll just have to turn to fan fiction and the internet for that one. I've already seen, I was just scrolling through the Cursed Child tags and stuff on the Scorpius Malfoy tag, I'm going to admit, on Tumblr, and there is already quite a lot of Scorbus stuff, and, okay, what have I got next? As we were talking about Rose Granger Weasley? Yeah. The way that her and Al don't get on and they pretend that they do for their parents, it's horrible. Because I always thought the Weasleys as this family is this big unit, and down the generations, all the cousins as like best friends, and just that divide between Rose and Albus, it kind of kills me a little bit because I just kind of want them all to be friends. Why? It's like mostly because they're in different houses, but that doesn't mean anything because in that case, Parvati Patel and Padma Patel stopped being really good friends even though they're twin sisters because they were in different houses. That didn't happen. They double dated to the Yule Ball. I mean, so that's a little bit like, oh. And I guess they do have slightly different personalities, but so do Harry and Hermione, really. Harry doesn't do his homework. Hermione is bookish and smart. And even there are some differences in the with Al and Scorpius. Obviously, it's pointed out that Scorpius is a huge geek and Albus isn't as much as a geek. So that bit got me a bit because I always had this kind of headcanon of all these Weasley cousins getting on really well at the Burrow, helping out with Christmas dinner, and they probably still do that, put up a front, but I want it to be real, like real everyone. So that bit got me a bit, as well as the obvious exclusion of Hugo. He's mentioned once, maybe twice, and he doesn't actually have a speaking role, which is fine. I mean, it's quite a big cast anyway. There are a lot of characters in it. But I do feel like excluding Hugo, I do know that annoyed people when the previews came out, so it would have been nice to have a little bit more Hugo in there. I mean, he is Rose's brother and one of Hermione's other child. So yeah, and I would have loved there to be a little bit more Lily and James, but the kids, not... Oh, that's another good point. We get Lily and James, a little baby Harry in a pushchair. I didn't mention that earlier. Get to see the Potter family. That's quite sweet. And Albus mentions it to Harry. He's like, I saw you with your dad when you were a baby and he used to do this smoke trick that would make you giggle. That's quite a good bit. So there is, yeah. But I would have liked maybe more of the Weasley cousin dynamics. But that's fine. I mean, we know that Teddy was in Hufflepuff, don't we? Because JK, she might put some more stuff up about them on Pottermore or something. We will have to see about that one. Dumbledore still giving some pretty weird advice to children about children, that children have to suffer and stuff. And I get it, Dumbledore, you suffered and it made you a better person, okay? But you also, like, it's your fault you suffered. I mean, and not everyone deals with suffering the same way. I mean, Voldemort, Tom Riddle suffered, and it turned him into the evilest wizard to ever exist. So you can't really be like, ooh, you need suffering. And it's not even actually Dumbledore, it's like a painting of Dumbledore trying to give out advice. I'm like, no, just go back to, you know, wandering through the painting frames and just shut up, Dumbledore. Dumbledore also cries. He has a little confrontation with Harry, and painting starts crying, which is weird. Can paintings cry when it's like paint smudge? How does that work? I'm not sure, but yeah, Dumbledore's still Dumbledore, but he does try to redeem himself a bit. Because his redemption didn't quite affect me the same way that Snape's did. It was just him being like, I loved you, Harry, crying. I mean, which is nice, I guess. And how Dumbledore avoided telling Harry that he loved him almost as a son because everyone he loved died. Which, I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, I don't really think that's necessarily because you told them you loved them. It's just because you're a bit of a dick, really. Sorry, Dumbledore. This is going to be a super long video. I'm pretty sure that's everything I've got on my list. Let me see. Oh no, got some stuff about Ron. Okay. So as I said, Ron is quite comical. There are moments where I think like Al was in the hospital wing or something's happened, and I think it's when Al and Scorpius go missing. Everyone rushes to Hogwarts to try and find them. Draco, Harry, Ginny, Hermione, and Ron. But Ron turns up late. And I think it's made obvious that he decided, oh no, my nephew's gone missing. I'm just going to quickly pop to the kitchen and have some Hogwarts food. Because he'd mentioned before how much he misses the foods at the feast. And as we know, Ron loved the foods at the feast. He's shoving in chicken legs and stuff. But I don't think Ron would have put food over his nephew. I don't, that bit was just a bit like, alright, it's quite comical. Ron going to get the food, but at the same time, Albus is in trouble, and I don't think he would have done that. That's not the Ron. That's not the Ron I love. That's not my Ron. So yeah, that's a little bit. Sometimes the humour didn't really work. And it would have been nice to have Ron doing more than just being a comic relief. So I feel like it would have been quite nice. There wasn't really any, as I said, there's a really good connection between Ron and Ginny. There obviously, it's mentioned that she's writing letters to him and they're bantering like siblings. But there isn't really any Harry and Ron, like, by themselves. There's Harry, Ron with like Ginny and Hermione and blah blah blah. But there isn't any like Harry and Ron moments. That friendship's kind of brushed over, and I get that they're busy, they have jobs, they're adults, but I feel like it would have been nice. Obviously Harry's struggling, he's talking about how he didn't have a father role model and that he thinks he's a bad dad, especially to Albus. So I feel like it would have been quite nice to have this moment where Harry confesses that he wishes he was more like Ron when it comes to being a father or something, because we always had Ron in Harry's shadow. I feel like it would have been quite nice to explicitly point out Harry being in Ron's shadow in this kind of being a parent and adult thing. I feel like that would have been really nice to have Ron finally have one over on Harry, so to speak. And yeah, I just would have liked more Harry and Ron, really, because that friendship is basically the building blocks of everything in all the other books. Especially since quite a lot of the story takes place back in Harry's fourth year, which is obviously where Ron and Harry had that fallout. So yeah, I feel like they could have shown that dynamic more, because Harry and Ron are the best of friends. And yeah, I would have liked that scene, maybe, with Harry and Ron. So I'm pretty sure that's all I've got to say. I'm pretty sure I've been talking for like an hour. I'm pretty sure I have an hour of footage, so we'll see what actually makes the cut in the video. It's probably just all the Hinny and Scorpius stuff. People are like, what? There were other stuff that happened in this. Why is it all Hinny and Scorpius Malfoy? But yeah, thanks for watching. Sorry this is awful quality. My camera died and I really, 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 really wanted to talk about the cursed child, so this is what's happened. So bye guys, see you soon.